That pain you are feeling is Jewish peoplehood. So began the identically titled piece published in the Sapir Journal by the incredible Dr. Mijan Bitton, Hartman Institute Research Fellow and co-founder of the Downtown Minyan in New York City. In her article, Bitton recounts a sermon given in 1956 by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. He's also known as the Rav, Harav, in which he asks the question, is the Jewish diaspora one or not? Are we still a we? Soloveitchik then noted that others long ago had struggled with a similar question, but had determined how to answer it using a seemingly strange situation of a person with two heads, and how to determine whether such a person should be considered one individual or two. In a midrash, King Solomon, renowned for his wisdom, determined whether the person was a single entity or not by pouring very hot water onto one of the heads. If the other head felt the pain, then the two-headed person was considered to be a single soul. If not, then they were considered to be two separate entities who only by happenstance inhabited the same body. The Rav concluded, so long as there is shared suffering, there is unity. Bitton concludes her article, this painful test is the test of peoplehood. Though personally I have always felt bound to the notion of one Jewish people as a core and guiding principle, and though I have myself taught this midrash to many interdenominational Jewish groups over the last 2 decades as a means of understanding our enduring intra-Jewish connection, I confess I have never felt the all-encompassing weight and burden, along with comfort and embrace, that this teaching offers in its truth, as I have over the past 4 weeks. Of course, in the immediate and ongoing aftermath of the horrors of October 7th in Israel, but also in the wake of the unbelievable but believable waves of anti-Jewish hatred, rhetoric, and violence seemingly flooding so much of our world, and in particular here in America. Perhaps you learned of Israel's travel warning issued to Israelis this morning, advising them not to travel here or to many places in the world due to this increasing threat of anti-Semitism. Yesterday, I had the occasion to sit twice with family members of hostages being held in captivity by Hamas in Gaza. One of those family members shared that she feels much safer in Israel than here. I found myself lamenting this week that for all the times I have lifted up for this community the famous Passover notion, B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. In every generation, one is obligated to see themselves as if they themselves were redeemed from Egypt. I have not once taught to you the other Bechol Dor Vador text in the Haggadah. In every generation, our enemies will rise up against us. For me at least, the language of redemption and its ensuing purpose is a much more comfortable and comforting place to be than in the dialectic of degradation and defense. And yet, it is in this very space of discomfort that Bitten suggests we can not only find proof of our peoplehood, but in which we can and should locate our agency and activate our power. To hold on to this pain tightly and fiercely, even from afar. Our task is to channel it into unwavering and committed action, to either join the battle on our own way or to hold up the hands of others who are fighting it their way. And to that, I would add that it is this very call that sits at the heart of what it means and has always meant to be a Jew. So what is that? Consider first the initial narratives in Torah are not about Jews. They are about humans, and in many ways they develop around one shared key flaw: the failure of responsibility. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has pointed out, Adam and Eve lack personal responsibility. Adam says, "It wasn't me, it was her." Eve says, "It wasn't me, it was him." Cain denies moral responsibility. "Am I my brother's keeper?" And Noah fails the test of collective responsibility. He saves his family, but no one else, and he doesn't even try. When does the Torah get Jewish? With Avram and Sarai, who become our Jewish progenitors, Avraham and Sarah. And they sit as the precise countertext to all the previous narratives. Consider Avraham, who in this week's portion exercised both personal and moral responsibility, first in the story by resolving a family conflict with his nephew, and later rescuing both his nephew and a host of others taken hostage in a local war in last week's Parsha. But even more of this responsibility is made manifest in Parshat Vayera, when God shares with Abraham the desire to destroy the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham takes it upon himself to approach God to challenge God's intent. Now remember, God does this exact same thing with Noah. God says to Noah, "I'm going to put an end to all the people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them." And what does Noah do? He does exactly as God commands him to do. He builds an ark. He brings his family upon it. And for 125 years, knowing the fate of humanity, he does not say a word. But not Abraham. From his core, Abraham understands collective responsibility. Why did God pick Abraham to be the first Jew? As Sachs rightly puts it, the answer is surely this: Abraham was to become the role model and initiator of a new faith, one that would not defend the human status quo, but challenge it. Jews do not accept the world that is. They challenge it in the name of the world that ought to be. This is a critical turning point in human history, the birth of the world's first religion of protest, the emergence of a faith that challenges the world instead of accepting it. Abraham took responsibility. He acted. He didn't wait for others to act. Of Noah, the Torah says he walked with God. But to Abraham, God says, "Walk before me. Be a leader. Walk ahead. Take personal responsibility. Take moral responsibility. Take collective responsibility." Judaism is God's call to responsibility. And I might add that it is this very responsibility which can not only define for us the foundation of our Jewish pride, but it can also be for us the fuel for our Jewish power. And I believe that it is that pride and that power that we are being called to activate now, precisely. We are not sheep. And we absolutely need not cower in the face of a hate whose shadows we know. No less in the face of the senseless bombast in so-called protests or internet memes, fueled not by moral confusion, but by intentional moral distortion. These are designed to make us fearful, to pull us apart from one another, to weaken our resolve and our resilience. But we know this playbook. We've seen it before. Remember, what makes this moment different from 1933 is that we now have the state of Israel. And we have, and don't let anyone tell you we don't, incredible privilege and power. This is nothing to be ashamed of. So if you are feeling powerless, I invite you to join with me and with us in remembering our particular Jewish call to responsibility as a means of reclaiming your footing. Consider wearing a blue ribbon like so many of us are. Learn the story of a hostage. Share their story with someone beyond the Jewish community, and then invite them to wear a ribbon too. That list we just read was not a yahrzeit list. Those people are still alive. Remind those who may be somehow confused that Hamas is a terrorist organization that did horrific things to thousands of your family members, your people, and who have done horrific things to hundreds of thousands of other people, not your people, but nevertheless about whom you care. Remind people who claim to care about innocent Palestinians that asserting Hamas is their liberation organization is not only an ignorant claim, but it is an indefensible one. It is morally repugnant. It denies Palestinians the very agency that these terrorists dressed up in the costume of freedom fighters claim to care about. It is outright anti-Semitic and nothing less than sanctioning your and our elimination. And remind people that as Jews, praying for any and all innocent souls, including those of the thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands caught in the horrors of this war in Gaza, is not just appropriate, it is a moral demand. None of these are matters about which moral clarity is difficult. If your friends, colleagues, or peers have not expressed their concerns for you, you should know that you have every right to share with them your hurt at their silence, that this is personal to you, and you can invite them to make it right. And chances are they will. And if they don't, then you are better off knowing where things stand. Don't like something your work or school administration or philanthropic interest has said or not said? Call them out on it. Write them a letter. You can use one of the many suggested templates that we have right on our Israel resource page on our website. All you have to do is fill in the blank and click send. Copy it and put it in an envelope. Contact your HR department or the DEI department at your school and call them to account. We do not owe anyone any explanation or justification for who we are. There is no other minority group who would ever be asked to defend the right of their existence. We have every right to be safe and protected just like everybody else, and it is time for every one of us to demand this. I want to be clear about something. Posting this on the internet is not the same thing. It is the equivalent of screaming into a bottomless pit. Reinvest your energies into the physical world where we live with other human beings with whom we must contend. And I know it might feel like we are alone, but we are not. The first words I received of support on Saturday, October 7th, were from Pastor Chris Harris and Bishop and Pastors Derek and Rashorna Fitzpatrick from Bronzeville and Lawndale, respectively. They sent messages to me personally and to all of us at NSCI, and they asked for it to be posted to our website immediately so we would all know that they stand with us and that they pray for us in their churches every day, and not just us, but for Israel and the people of Israel, as they do for all innocent souls. And they've continued to check in on a regular basis. Don't believe people when they say that the black community doesn't care about us. This is an attempt to divide us. Businesses all over the North Shore and beyond, owned by non-Jewish people, have put posters of the hostages in their windows, held fundraisers for Magen David Adom. Last night, 20,000 people rallied in Vienna. Kristallnacht is this week, and last night 20,000 people rallied in Vienna against anti-Semitism and in favor of the release of the 242 hostages being held by terror groups in Gaza. Today, Germany banned Hamas. Perhaps we'll see something similar here in the United States soon. I hope we'll have the opportunity to rally together as a community of good-willed people. When it's offered, I will sign up and go immediately, and I hope that you will join me. The pain you are feeling is Jewish peoplehood. But that pain is fuel. It always has been. Indeed, in every generation, an enemy does rise up against us. But it is that encounter which calls us to our higher purpose, to be awake in this world, to see it as it is, and yet still to see the possibility of what it can yet be. So open your eyes with me. Gaze fully at this new, but not new, landscape, and outright reject it as fait accompli. Join us in making the choice to embrace the particularity of Jewish pride and Jewish power so that we might yet affirm our global mission. We have one. Not to make the world more Jewish, but to make the world more human. And so I'll leave you with a teaching from my rabbi's rabbi and his father, Rabbi Jack Stern of blessed memory. It's one I try to live by. Our Jewish rationale is the vision of what God's world should be and God's people should be. Our Jewish vision is of God's world, where everyone can sit under his vine and fig tree and walk the streets of his own city with no one to make him afraid. Shabbat Shalom.